Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast. Our primary objective is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never quit. The reality of life is simple. We all fall. We all fail. At times, we get knocked down. The question is, do we get back up? Are we stronger? Are we better prepared to attain the maximum of our potential? Thank you for joining our No Quit tribe. As you go for your greatness today, never quit. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. Welcome to episode number 368 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is priorities over pleasures. Our quote of the day comes to us from Jim Rohn. If it's a priority, you'll find a way. If it isn't, you'll find an excuse. As we are looking to grow and build our podcast, we would love it if you could please subscribe to our show and leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcast. And please share our show with anyone in your tribe that you feel could benefit from our content. Thank you. I had such a great time speaking with our guest today. Not only was Sean Casey a very successful Major League Baseball player, but he's an even better person off the field. I think you'll really enjoy what Sean has to say, especially what he shares with us about the gaps. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Sean, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Yeah, what's up, Chris, man? Thanks for having me on, brother. Really appreciate it.
It is an honor to have the mayor officially on the podcast. So we had a great conversation offline. Have to ask real quick, where did the mayor come from? And initially, were you a fan of the nickname or did you just roll with it?
Well, you know what? It came from my coach in the Cape Cod League, who is now the head coach at Ohio State, who's been at TCU for a while, just got the head job at Ohio State. His guy's named Bill Mosiello. And back in 1994, you know, just that personality, bro, just like saying hi to everybody. How's it going? You know, it's just like kind of who I've been forever. And, you know, just recognizing people, just, you know, bringing people good energy. And Coach Mosiello at the time was kind of hard-nosed. Let's get grimy. Let's get serious. Now, he was a young kid, too, at the time. You know, when you're young like I was, I was 19 then, you think everybody older than you, especially a coach, is like 50. But he probably was like 27 at the time. You know, it's funny looking back. And he was, you know, he was just like, man, he goes, it looks like you're lobbying for votes every time I see you, bro. You're talking to everybody. You're talking to the first base coach, the guys at first, the umpires, the snack guy, the announcer, the fans. You're talking to everybody. You're like the mayor out there. And that's how it, and then one day, you know, I think it kind of trickled down. And one day I think on ESPN, like 1999, I hit a ball in the gap, ended up on third, and Carl Ravitch was like, Sean Casey with a big triple here. And, you know, he's nicknamed the mayor. And that was the first time I had heard it like nationally. Like I was like, I don't know how it trickled there, but then that's how it took off. Yeah. And I think it's a great nickname. I kind of love it. It's better than some other nicknames I could think of, you know?
Well, I was just about to say, I'm sure we've both been called worse things and nicknames we would not want on ESPN. So I'm sure there's more stories to that. We had a fun conversation before we went online, and obviously, as you know, the number one objective of our show is to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up. And I'm curious if you yourself have a no-quit story you could share with our listeners.
Oh my gosh, yeah. You know, my story goes back a while to when I was probably 14 years old. You know, when I look back, you know, recently this story has meant a lot more to me. My dad's just had 2 open heart surgeries in the last 7 months. He's 82. It's kind of been a grind. You know, he's kind of that hero figure in my life that like kind of was that guiding force in, you know, in so many things that I've done. And it really has given us, both of us, as we talk, and, you know, he was in the hospital for 11 weeks and we've had a chance to really kind of reminisce and just kind of grind together and, you know, look back at, you know, some of the times that we've had. And, you know, one of the stories that we always talk about and kind of my journey to the big leagues was, you know, I wasn't the guy that you looked at and go, oh man, that guy's going to play in the big leagues. Like you might've watched me run and go, that guy's got no chance of doing much. You know what I mean? Like I was the guy at the tryouts. I'd be like, all right, you know, we'd run the 60 and they'd never invite you back the next day to hit. And I'd be like, is this a track tryout or is this baseball? I'm so confused here, you know, but when you go back to like my story, I was one of the better hitters, one of the better players, 10, 11, 12, 13, you know, and probably like a lot of people out there, you get to that 14-year-old age where, you know, some of your buddies are hitting puberty, some people aren't. And I remember my freshman year in high school baseball, I just wasn't playing much. I played a little bit, but not really that much. It was the first time in my life that I hadn't played. And I was so frustrated. I remember coming home to my dad one day, and it was probably 10 games into the year. I was like, Dad, can you go talk to the coach? Because something's not right here. He obviously hasn't been watching 10, 11, 12-year-old travel all-stars where I was dominating. I'm not really playing that much in the team. If you could go talk to him and, let him know how good I am. And it was one of the best conversations that I ever had because as a father now of 4 kids, you hope you're having the right conversations with them. You hope you're saying no when you should say no, and yes when you should say yes. And you just don't know until they're up and doing their own thing in life. And I remember my dad saying to me, sitting down with me, and he was like, hey, he goes, you know what, Sean? He goes, I think you probably should be playing, and maybe you are maybe a little better than the guy playing right now. But one thing I do know is you're not glaringly better. You're not glaringly better than that guy, because if you were that coach that knows nothing about you, you'd be playing. He goes, but I'll make you a deal. I'm not going to go talk to the coach, but there's a batting cage that just opened up in the town next to us, and I'll make you a deal. If you go hit every day and use those tokens, he goes, I'll pay for all the tokens you use. As soon as you stop hitting, the deal's off. Because you have to understand in life, you got to put the work in. You got to be able to have a little bit of struggle and kind of fight through it. You got to be accountable for your actions and the habits that you create and the routines that you create. So why don't you start to work harder and create that habit of showing up every day to put the work in? And I was like, you got a deal, Dad. So I started to go, bro. This is exactly what happened. I started hitting every day after school, every single day. Wham, wham, wham. I met a guy named Frank Porco who was the hitting guy, the hitting coach at that facility. But Frank never even played like college ball. He was more of a high school, athlete, and he was doing hitting lessons on the side. I mean, Chris, when you talk about, divine intervention, like to meet Frank Porco to this day, this guy knew how to teach hitting more than most of the big league coaches I've ever had. And he would teach me 5:30 to 6 o'clock on Tuesday night. And I'd go and hit. And I started to fall in love and become obsessed with the craft of hitting. Hey, man, keep that front shoulder in. Hey, learn to work off that backside. Look middle way, react in. Drive the ball to left side. And when you're not with me on Tuesday nights, you got to hit, you got to hit, you got to hit. So those other 7 days was just repetition, plus intention. I always say repetition times intention is the mother of skill. All the time we always say, hey, the mother of skill comes from repetition. I don't believe that's true. I think it's intentional repetition is what brings that skill out. And I just started to develop that skill as a hitter. And my whole goal was to start on JV. And so, bam, here I go, sophomore year. I'm a starting JV first baseman. I'm like, yes, here we go. This stuff really works. It's like those marginal gains of every day doing it and showing up, and the invisible gains of, is this working? Is it not? And it was. And I started to see, wow, man, I'm starting to look like a glaringly better than some of the guys on my team now as a JV. Junior year I start, senior year I start, and I'm fired up now. Now I feel like, man, I'm a good player. Like I'm hitting puberty. I'm getting stronger. I hit every day. I'm driving the ball all over the place, and I'm really, really fired up. So I'm thinking, man, I want to play college baseball. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, I want to play in the big leagues one day. You know what I mean? That's really where I'm going. I want to play in the big leagues one day. And my dad, another lesson from my dad. It's incredible. I'm 17, 18 years old, my senior year, and I'm like, Dad, how come none of these colleges are coming here? None of these colleges are coming here. And my dad's big message to me when I was 14 was, preparation meeting opportunity. He said, if you want to play college baseball, you got to be prepared for when that opportunity comes. And what a shame it would be if the opportunity comes and you're not ready. And I was like, oh. And then I started to think, man, my dad's advice is not working, because here I am, senior year, don't really have any offers, right? So it's like the beginning of my senior season. I come home one day and I'm like, and I just kind of that little whiny voice. Well, no one's calling me, and I don't know what's happening. No one thinks I'm a good hitter, and I know I'm good. And my dad was kind of like, hey, listen, you got to learn in life. Nobody's coming for you. Like nobody's going to come help you the way you need to help yourself. He's like, why don't you sit down and write 30 letters to colleges that you want to go to? Division I, Division II, Division III. tomorrow after school, when you come home, I'll sit down with you at the desk. And my dad at the time had just started his own company called Casey Chemical. So I saw the work that he put in. I saw the network marketing that he did, the letters that he sent out all the time, and was always like, if one of these letters, we're going to send 5,000 letters out a month. If one of these letters comes back, that's how we pay the bills. That's how we keep the lights on, right? So it was that I saw him doing this stuff. So I knew when he was saying, you got to go out to people. You got to sell yourself. So I sat down this one day after school. I wrote to Clemson. I wrote to Penn State. I wrote to Marietta. I wrote to College of Worcester. I wrote to Morehead State, D1, D2, D3, right? And on the last letter, Chris, he was like, hey, listen, send one to University of Richmond. They sent you a flyer. Last year, you know what I mean? Like at the Keystone State games. I mean, nowadays kids are on social media. You're just Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. Hey, check me out. How good I am. My dad's like, hey, write a letter to University of Richmond. They sent you a flyer last year, a brochure. They sent you a brochure saying, hey, this is our campus. Last letter, bro. Dear Coach Atkins, Coach McQueen, blah, blah, blah. I really want to go to University of Richmond. Never even really knew University of Richmond. That was the last one I sent out. Bam, 31 letters go out. Couple months go by. The season's about to end. 4 days to go in the season. We're playing this team Montour. Bases loaded, first inning. I come up, wham, rocket left center gap. Couple runs score. Next at bat, rocket to right center. I go 4 for 4, 8 RBIs, 4 doubles. Look, literally the best game of my high school career. I'm going out to first base in the 7th inning. My coach, Jerry Malarkey, grabs me on the shoulder right before I get out there. He goes, Case, he goes, how many hits you got today, man? I got 4 hits. He goes, how many RBIs? 8 RBIs, 4 doubles. He goes, man, that's awesome. See that guy right there behind the backstop? That's Coach Mark McQueen. He drove 6 hours from the University of Richmond to come see you on the letter that you sent him. After the game, I walk up, I shake Coach McQueen's hand. He's like, hey, man, nice to meet you. Really like your swing. He goes, I'm glad I came up to see you. I'm going to get back to you tomorrow. I'm going to go back and talk to Coach Atkins and see if we could do something to get you to University of Richmond. Next day, he calls me. He's like, hey, I talked to Coach Atkins. We'd like to give you $1,000 scholarship. Well, at the time, bro, I think Richmond was like $30,000 a year. My dad was making $33,000 a year as a chemical salesman. I'm like, oh. So obviously I said to my dad, what are we going to do? He's like, take the scholarship. We'll figure out the money later, but just get in the dance. And dude, that's how I ended up going to University of Richmond. First day on campus, never saw the campus. And I keep the thing going, Chris. I hit every day, like priorities over pleasure. Like I hit every single day before I did anything in college by myself in the Robbins Center in the basketball arena. We called it the dungeon down there. It was like a little dungeon, little rocky. I still love 2 bands, AC/DC and Pearl Jam to this day, because I wore out Back in Black and the 10 album. I would just hit buckets of balls, try to go to left center as many times as I could on those albums. I end up being a freshman All-American. I started my freshman year at Division I program. Sophomore year, I do really well, go to the Cape Cod League, almost win the MVP of the Cape Cod League. Incredible, right? With Bill Mosiello, who gave me the mayor nickname, Wood Bats. That's where I kind of got on the map. Junior year, brother, I'm out there. I end up hitting .461, and I win the NCAA batting title. So 3 years earlier, I come home. Well, 8 years earlier, I come home to my dad and say, could you go talk to the coach? He says, no, you got to put the work in. You got to put the time in. Preparation, meeting, opportunity. 4 years later, I write 31 letters to colleges asking, I just want to walk on. Just somebody give me a shot. 3 years later, I'm the best hitter in Division I baseball, win the NCAA Division I batting title, become a second-round pick of the Cleveland Indians, and 2 years later, I'm in the big leagues, and that kind of starts that journey. But that's my journey of like that relationship with my dad, the advice of, the old vitamin N, no, I'm not going to go do that. You got to figure it out yourself. I'm just so grateful for those conversations. I'm grateful for his wisdom. And I'm just so grateful that was kind of my journey to get to the big leagues. Like and for me, it wasn't like nothing was handed to me. It was like, you either do or you don't. It's the whole Yoda thing. There is no try. You either do or you don't. You don't try to get there. You put in the work or you don't. And I look back, man, so grateful to so many people along the way, that kind of helped me get there.
That's a fantastic story. What was that one you said, priorities over what?
Pride is over pleasures, right? Like I was always like, I gotta hit before I do anything. You know, I look back at college, I'm in a fraternity. I got, you got extracurricular activities, you got baseball, you got school, all this stuff. But I was like, I gotta make sure I get my hitting in and my schoolwork in before anything else. And I think that was such an important part for me.
I absolutely love that story. And I think the way in which it started was awesome. Your dad offered you, in essence, made a deal. I assume he probably knew that you were going to buy into it, but the end result is going and doing the work and putting in the work. So have to ask you to touch on something that we spoke about, the concept of the powers in the gap, which I know you're speaking about, but if you could just briefly touch on what that really means and how it can relate all areas of life.
Well, I think the biggest thing is like, I always think of, if you go back as a baseball player, you yourself being a great athlete and all the guys that you've worked with or guys that are in that profession, I play with guys like Ken Griffey Jr., David Ortiz, Adam Duss, some of the best hitters in the game. Where'd they make their living? In the gaps. Where's the success? In the gaps. If you want to play in the big leagues, where do you got to drive the ball? In the gaps. Where's the biggest part of the park? In the gaps. How do you be a great hitter in the big leagues? You stay up the middle, you stay in the gaps, right? To defend the gaps, who do you put out there? You put your fastest guy in center field to roam the gaps because they're that important, right? And so for me, I think the power's in the gaps in the big leagues and in baseball in general, and I think the power's in the gaps in our lives. I always say, like, if you want to be a great athlete, you better have proper perspective off the field. You better have proper perspective who you are. You better have proper perspective to see to see when you get in that batter's box, it's not life or death. You are, such an important individual. So when I look at the gaps, my first thing is I look at gratitude, like the superpower of gratitude. What it does, all the studies on it, how it really, brings your essence of, you really look at yourself and how special you are. And I always say this, when you think of gratitude, it frustrates me at times because I think sometimes in our society, depression, especially nowadays, runs rampant in our society. And I think sometimes, like the Powerball recently was $2.1 billion, right? Who's not talking about that? Hey, Chris, did you get a ticket, man? Did you buy your ticket? $2.1 billion, the Super Powerball. And everyone's going, oh yeah, you got to get your Powerball ticket. $2.1 billion. It'll change your life. It'll make you better. It'll give you the house you want, the car you want, whatever you want, right? It'll do that for you. And I'll give some away and I'll share it, right? And I think to myself, oh my gosh, like we miss the boat sometimes in our lives, really. Like the odds of you and I being here as a human being are 1 in 400 trillion, which is like winning the Super Powerball 9 times. So I think to myself, like, man, what if we started with a baseline of gratitude? Like, oh my gosh, every day you wake up, you win the lottery, right? There's no one with your handprints, no one with your fingerprints, no one with your footprints, your smile, your nose, your hairs, no one. Out of 1 in 8 billion people, you're lucky to be here, right? As a matter of fact, you're a walking miracle. You're in the baseball card industry. You're a gem mint 10. So I always think that gratitude perspective, if that is your baseline for your life, you as an athlete can now go out there and say, everything else is a bonus, man. The bottom line is I'm here in 2022 and I'm fortunate to be here. So that's the first part of the gaps. And then I go down and I believe the A in the gaps is accountability. Just like we talked about, like, are you accountable for the work that you put in? Are you accountable for the people you hang out with? Are you accountable for how you sleep, how you eat, how you move? Are you accountable for some silence in your life? Are you accountable for can you turn your phone off when you need to? Are you accountable for your habits and your routines? Like, do you take accountability for yourself? Or do you look outward for that? Do you want the coach to go talk to do you want your dad to go talk to the coach? You know what I mean? Or are you going to actually take accountability for who you are and what you do every day and control what you need to control? And then the other one is, the P, I go a few different directions of it, but the process of your life, right? We talked about perspective, perspective could be another P, but the process of your life too, the protocol. How do you live your days? What do your days look like? I know for me as a baseball player, my routine and my process was everything. When I first got to the big leagues, all the veteran players, the number one thing they would say was, hey, get a routine. Hey, get a routine. Hey, get a routine. I'm like, what does that mean? They're like, well, you'll learn your routine as you start to play 162 games in 180 days, you will have to find a routine that works for you, a routine that gives you the best energy, a routine that gets your mind right, a routine that slows things down. And I got one. Not only the physical part, the hitting and all that stuff, what started at 4 o'clock for a 7 o'clock game, but at 6 o'clock before the game, my routine really started to get my mind right. At 6 o'clock, I would go in, I would sit down wherever it was, if just a quiet space. And usually on the road, it was a bathroom stall. I go back to the minor leagues. I can't tell you how many visiting bathroom stalls I sat in to just sit down. I'd sit down with 3 things. I'd sit down with the Mental Game of Baseball book by Harvey Dorfman. I was going through it the other day, and I would go to this one chapter called Mental Discipline. And it was one paragraph, and it talked about see the ball, process over results, see the ball be easy, process over results, focus on the task at hand. I used to always tell myself. So I'd read that paragraph. I'd bring the Bible in with me because I would always read a passage that would just keep perspective. Like, hey, man, you're not just a baseball player. Life's a little bigger than that. So for me, it worked for me to read a passage, the Mental Game of Baseball, and then I would do this thing called the release technique, which I think is now called the Sedona method. There's a book on it. But what I would do is I would feel the energy, the nervous energy in my body. And one thing you realize is that as energetic beings, if you're getting that, those butterflies, they're going to show up somewhere, whether it's your throat, your solar plexus, your stomach. And I would feel the energy of the game or whatever was going on in my life. And what I would do is I'd put my head down. I'd feel it. I'd picture a window or a door opening up in that area of my body. I would breathe in as much as I could through my nose, and then I would breathe that energy out. And I did it for like 10 minutes. Chris, it was incredible, man. I'd walk out of that room from 6 to 6:30 in a state that was ready to play that game. I'd go to my locker. I'd get dressed, 6:45. I'm running sprints. And I always was amazed at that routine, that process of what I needed to do to get ready for a game. It was everything. Had I not done that, no chance, brother. There's no chance. And a lot of times on the road, Kaner and I talk about this a lot. On the road, I used to put together, I had a vision coach named Bill Harrison who passed away a few years ago. His son, Ryan Harrison, carries on the legacy of a slowthegamedown.com. And Bill Harrison used to say, hey, listen, when you're struggling, and this is back when it was DVDs, get a DVD of your best games, of your best swing. And when you're on the flight, watch them. Just watch them over and over again. And that visualization was part of my routine to kind of get me right. So part of the process. And then my last part of the gaps is service. You want to do the most selfish thing in your life, bro? Go serve somebody else. And I don't know what it is, but as human beings, we're meant to make an impact, whether it's go serve your kids, go serve your wife, serve your girlfriend, go serve the guy that you see maybe in the grocery store that you're going to say hi to and make their day. But if you're always looking for that act of service, it's the most selfish thing you can do, bro, because it makes you feel so good. For whatever reason, that's the language of the soul. The language of the soul is service. And it's incredible. One of the greatest things that I've been fortunate enough to be a part of is about 11 years ago, I started a Miracle League field here called the Miracle League of the South Hills, which we serve over 350 special needs kids to play baseball, Down syndrome, autism, cerebral palsy. And it's incredible. All those kids have a buddy. So there's 350 kids with 350 buddies, all their parents, all the grandparents, aunts, uncles, all the people that come out that serve each other in this community to be with these kids. I said, if you're having a bad day, you're feeling depressed, you don't feel joy in your life, come out to the Miracle League for 30 minutes and you'll feel the joy, the gratitude and love that's in your soul.
First of all, I did not know that you do that. That is fantastic. But in regards to the gaps, I love how you broke that down. So I hope our listeners were taking notes like I was, but I definitely hope that people go back and replay that because I think it's super powerful. So changing lanes for a second, I know you're familiar with the quote by Jim Rohn, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. If I could grant you dinner with any 5 people, dead or alive, to level up with, who would you pick?
That's incredible. Well, I'd love to have dinner with Jesus. I think that'd be a good time. I think he's got some great stuff. I would love to have dinner with Jackie Robinson. I just would love to know. I would love to know how he was so patient I would love to know how he did what he did. And I would love to sit down and have that conversation with him. It would be incredible. Matter of fact, I had an unbelievable conversation I probably would have said this had I not had a 30-minute conversation with Hank Aaron a few years ago at the World Series. I was in a box with him at Major League Baseball, and Harold Reynolds was talking to him. Next thing you know, I was talking to Hank and Harold. Harold walks off, and then Hank Aaron and I go into this incredible conversation about how he hit cross-handed in the Negro Leagues, how he used to switch hit, and just through this whole thing. So Jackie Robinson would probably be one. I would love that. Marcus Aurelius. I think that'd be incredible, to pick his brain and see how he was the leader that he was, but also with the philosophy that he had in his mind, how incredible that was. I would also say, who else would I say? I would also love to have JFK. I would love to sit down with JFK and just go back to some of the decisions he had to make in the Cuban Missile Crisis, and just some tough things that he had to go through. And one of the other people I would love to sit down with would be Martin Luther King. I just feel like my dad. I look back at my dad. My dad was at the Martin Luther King I Have a Dream speech back in the day.
Oh, wow.
And incredible. So I talked to my kids about, talking to him about what it was like to be there. And, I think just the nonviolence approach of protest, the patience and all the things that he had, just like I said about Jackie Robinson, would be very interested to have a meal with Martin Luther King and, just have a couple questions I could ask him.
It's hard for me to say, but I think your 5 puts you probably in the top 5 for the most interesting yet impactful dinners out there. So I think that is really fascinating.
Let's go.
We're gonna follow down the same route, and we're switching to what we call our hot seat questions. And the only request we have of you is that you spit out the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
Last meal. You can pick anything you want. What do you pick?
Filet mignon, medium rare, side of mashed sweet potatoes.
Favorite smell?
Vanilla.
Other than baseball, what is your second favorite sport?
Football.
Do you have an all-time favorite team?
Pittsburgh Pirates.
Favorite movie?
Braveheart.
Great flick. Favorite book?
Mental Game of Baseball.
What's the favorite app you have on your phone?
Heroic.
What's the background picture on your phone?
My kids.
Do you have an all-time favorite quote?
Yes. It's okay to suck, not okay to skip.
I like that. And what is that song, no matter whatever you hear it, morning, afternoon, or evening, you automatically turn it up and just absolutely rock out to it?
I have so many of them. Back in Black, AC/DC.
I was about to say, I was going to say that because I think that's how you became such a great hitter.
Or Pearl Jam, Yellow Ledbetter.
Okay. In these challenging times, wanted to ask, within social media, are there one or two people that you'd recommend that really put out great content, uplifting content, maybe that our listeners have not heard of?
Well, Brian Johnson, for me, the guy that does the Philosopher's Notes, and he has an incredible app called Heroic that I just said been life-changing for me. So his stuff is amazing. Like that, like I said, that app is amazing, and the content in there is incredible. I would recommend that. Like, that would be the first recommendation I would make. There's another guy that I really love that's been a big part of my life, kind of been a mentor to me, is a guy named Michael DeSanti. And not a ton of people know about him, but I really believe in the next couple of years, you really will get to know this guy. He's just got such great stuff. I took his course called Finding Your Tribe, and another course he's doing right now. Really love him. Michael DeSanti. So those are two guys. Brian Johnson and Michael DeSanti are two guys that I would wish everybody would check out.
I appreciate it. And you have your Breakthrough Pro, but also you have your fantastic podcast. So I wanted to ask if you wouldn't mind just briefly touching on that for our listeners. And then what's the best way for them to follow you and stay connected with you?
Yeah. We've had a podcast. I've had a podcast for a couple of years with a friend of mine named Rich Cincinnati. Call him Chinch. And we do a podcast daily at the mayor's office. And, we've done like 65, 70 guests, Johnny Bench, Jim Leland, Jim Thome, Kurt Schilling, John Smoltz, like some really good stuff. If you go back and check it out, incredible stuff. We do a daily podcast now, 20 to 30 minutes. You can find us on Spotify. You can find us on Apple. You can find us on YouTube too, at the Mayor's Office with Sean Casey. And, and we also do a lot of, on my podcast, I have a couple of the guys I have mindset wise, Brian Johnson, Mark Devine, who's the, Navy SEAL who's done SEAL Fit, and Michael DeSantis on there too. And, we talk a lot of baseball, a lot of sports stuff now, but we also talk a lot of mindset stuff too. So that's where I'm kind of going down that road too, to start doing like a Mindset Monday. But it's a great listen. We enjoy it. We're getting more and more listeners. So yeah, if you could tune in, that'd be great. At the Mayor's Office, you can come find us.
Awesome. And then last question we have for you, same question we ask everybody, is if you have any parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners today.
I guess the parting words is like, you got to write your own story. I think sometimes we're such a reactive society now with social media and all the, stuff out there that we can get, kind of addicted into that addiction, mindset of like, I just think like everyone has exactly what they need for happiness inside them. Like, take care of your energy. Physiology drives 90% of psychology. I really believe that. How well you eat, sleep, and move. Physiology drives 90% of your psychology. It's the truth. So how well you eat, sleep, move, and even focus, even a meditation of silence. I don't think nowadays there's enough silence in our lives because there's so much noise. So like I said, you have everything you need for fulfillment and happiness right in your own self. Tap into it.
I think that is a fantastic way to end today's episode, and I hope that you and I can connect again soon. And thank you again for being on the podcast.
Yeah, Chris, man, thank you so much for having me, man. You're doing wonderful things, dude, and I appreciate you having me on, man.
Thank you for listening to episode number 368. Gratitude, accountability, process, and service. Sean's 4 words for what he calls the gaps really hit home with a bunch of what we often talk about here at No Quit Living. In his parting words, the mayor told us to go out and write our own story. So my challenge to you today is just that. You are the only you there will ever be. And since nobody is going to write your story for you, do it yourself. Take that first step today and not only write your story, but go out and define it. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.